I also note that elections are the hallmark of a democracy. We have to therefore protect the integrity of the election process. Certainly as an elected official, I can certainly appreciate that. When I look at the whole context of this, when I consider the testimony that was presented to me, I find that Mr. Nelson has overreached, and the resulting actions would not have been charged, but for the fact that this overreaching by Mr. Nelson. So I am finding at this time that there is no substantial evidence to warrant conviction. I'm releasing you from this case, and the matter is concluded. We're off.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you very much.
I'm just doing my job.
Once again, good attorney. Well, I was an official observer for the Democratic Party and the Libertarian Party. And one of my functions was to go ahead and to verify the seals on the bags. When I first saw Brad, we were talking, I said, Brad, is all the seals in the bags right? He said, well, there's 2 bags that the poll workers didn't put the seals on. I said, well, that's understandable.
I'm still trying to figure out what's the newsworthy, why they sent us here.
Okay, let me tell you what it may have been, and that is that there was a gentleman who was a representative of the Libertarian Party, I believe, and when I say I believe is sometimes he's on the scene as a representative for the Democratic Party, and sometimes he's here as the Libertarian Party. I believe the gentleman here was here as a representative of the Libertarian Party this morning. He was an observer, not one of the auditors. He had some questions that he wanted to ask some of the audit boards as they were engaged in the process, which was perfectly fine. I mean, the questions were appropriate.
Brad said that I was not allowed to talk to any of our Democratic volunteers or libertarians. And you know, as Bill Reiser says, well, we're the ones who organized the poll workers, the audit people to come down here to verify. And basically, I was arrested for asking questions.
I just asked the gentleman if instead of interrupting the boards that he would direct the questions to me, perhaps I could answer them. And if that wasn't the case, then I would go to the individual boards and find out additional information rather than him talking to each individual board, disrupting the information, disrupting the process that they were doing. He refused to do that, so I asked for a deputy sheriff to intervene. The deputy sheriff asked him to please stop, and he said that he would not, and indeed this gentleman asked for the deputy sheriff to arrest him, and an arrest was made.
I told him that I had to stay here until 1 o'clock, and the only way that I would leave is if I was arrested. I have an obligation to be here, and a responsibility. Our job is to verify the vote, and that nothing has tampered with those ballots since election night at the precinct. And like I said, those sealed numbers were not matching up or were verifiable. Realistically, what they should have done is rejected those and drawn numbers for new bags and verified that until we had a bag that was original from election night, that the seal is verifiable. And that's our job, is to verify the vote, even with this very small, minuscule audit that we're doing.
The broken sealed bags, they were counted.
Yes, they were.
They were. And they were counted because, in your mind, there was enough transparency in this process from the ballot to the bag to here, where there'd be no issues of...
No, certainly there's a learning curve and some improvement on the way we do seals, but to add to something that you said, is the ballots themselves had already been counted by machine. Mm-hmm. So the ballots had been counted prior to the exercise that we're doing here today. What we did here was a hand count audit to compare it to the machine.
And then I started checking other bags, and I found that 3 other bags that when they opened them, the seals were right, but there was nothing to verify that these were the same seals that the poll workers put on that night. How it's supposed to work is that once the certified report is put into the bag, and then the seal is removed and put onto it, and you use the paper in the bag to verify that that is the same seal. 7 of the 9 bags that I checked were improperly sealed.
What are some of the problems when these bags come in and they do have broken seals? What does that suggest?
Well, what it suggests is that there's the possibility that the bag has a broken seal. I mean, However, the ballot has been moved from the polling place to the receiving center under the observation of 2 different political party observers. So they are there to make certain that if the bag isn't sealed, for example, as they were trying to attach the seal at the polling place, it broke or they couldn't find their seal, they still transport, but because there's a Republican and Democrat under control and observation of that equipment, when they get to the receiving center and perhaps inform the people there that, hey, we broke our seal or we couldn't find it, then an additional seal is to be logged into the log to say, precinct, for example, 99 showed up and didn't have a seal on their bag. They'll note down the time of day, the date, who was actually there delivering the unsealed bag, hand them a receipt, and on that receipt it will be the seal number that they put in place of the original seal.
You described the discrepancy that Brakey discovered in the altercation that took place.
What Brakey was complaining about were seals being broken on bags of ballots, or in some cases, seals were on there, but they did not match the paperwork as to what seal was supposed to be on there. Now that happened to my bag, my last bag that I dealt with in there was precinct 139. It had one seal on it that did not match the poll worker records as to what seal should have been on that bag. The poll worker's old seal, broken off, was inside the bag, and then somebody had swapped it later. Now, Brad Nelson tried to show me paperwork showing that a deputy at around 10:30 at night, well, 2200 something hours at night, had swapped seals. But I don't understand why he swapped seals. There's no record of why he pulled the old seal and why this exchange occurred under the control of a deputy.
Does that whole process involve outside observers? You said the transport of those ballot bags had outside observers, Republican, Democrat, there with it, as those bags were transferred from video surveillance storage to this location, correct?
From video surveillance storage to this location, it was 2 members of my staff, so it wasn't traveling just by themselves, and they delivered the material here, again, in the return of video surveillance here. So they're never under control of just one individual.
So there's an inadequate explanation and paper trail for why seals were either missing in some precincts, or in the case of my precinct, the wrong seal was on there.
If I understand things, the numbers, some of the bags that came in here, the seals may have been of a different number, or there were required documents that should have been in the bag that wasn't there, or the seal wasn't on it. These are things that one would call anomalies and may have been the condition of the bags when they arrived. So that's the question. Was that the condition of the bags, and what's in terms of chain of custody, what's happened to those bags and so forth. So the form that they're using doesn't permit recording that there are any of these changes or anything that you could compare with. Although the records are at the end of the hall, they won't be brought down, and what our observer said was that he wasn't permitted initially to take paper in and even write them down. Yeah. So can you all keep track? Or
we don't have any place to record it. We don't have a separate piece of paper to write on. We've got the form that the Secretary of State issued.
Yeah.
And there is no place on that form to write down that there was a problem with the seal.
Can you just make up your own?
Well, if I had a problem with the seal, I mean, there's a place to put the seal number,
Yeah.
and I would think it would make sense, logically, if the seal is wrong, to just make a little note under the seal number and say, this doesn't match, or the yellow form is missing, or whatever the anomaly is. I would think it would make sense to write that down, but Brad said they're not writing it. And there seems to be no requirement to write it down. So, at any rate, that's what I know.
But
And so any fixing of the
can't
problem,
independently keep track, or is that?
we don't have anything to write it on. I mean, I could keep track of it in my
Bring
head.
you a legal pad.
Apparently that's not allowed in here. we're apparently not allowed to have any extraneous material. That's my understanding. I mean, like I had my notebook here, and I was told to put it out here. I was not supposed to have my notebook in the room.
Brad,
Yes, sir.
a question for you. So the anomalies that need to be reported, the Democratic Party can have paper and write them down.
Correct.
Okay. I thought, do you have a rule that they can't take paper in there?
Some of them are using scratch paper right now as they're doing some of their tallies and stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
I'd like to have some scratch.
Yeah. I don't want to digress. So yeah.
No,
Yeah.
you
So
can
now,
settle.
so if Mickey, for example, wants to write down that the seal number was X and it should have been Y or something, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
There's just no official documentation process.
We've got, as I mentioned, I believe to Mickey, I've talked to several people about this. We've got the receiving logs that when poll workers drop their gear off at one of the satellite locations, that they documented what seal number was on that blue bag, or if the seal number wasn't on that, or if there was a seal, that they put a seal on it. That's the way it should be properly done. We've got copies of that. You asked me about that.
But those are not, the audit boards are not looking at those, right?
That's correct.
The election department doesn't like observation, and they always hassle the observers. So I guess John was arrested because he was asking questions of individuals, and the election director insists that all questions go through him, and that observers follow his process, not what they think is effective observation process.
How many precincts did the party officials pick for recount the day before Saturday, on Friday? Party officials picked 9 precincts. They picked 9. Okay, we seem to have reports of 7 of them with some kind of chain of custody issue, whether it was missing yellow sheet inside, or a seal broken, or a seal missing. There was some issue with 7 out of 9.
Okay.
That number is giving people the heebie-jeebies. It's striking people as real freaking high.
Okay.
Okay? Is there any way of figuring out what percentage, if we were to grab another 10, 20, whatever it was, blue bags, wherever they're, I have no idea where you're keeping them, but if we were to go through them and just check for seal issues and whether or not there's a yellow sheet in there, things like that, how many of those, call it 20, would you expect to have a problem with? Or call it 100 for percentage purposes.
Oh, out of 100?
Yeah. How many would you expect to have a problem?
Less than 5.
Less than 5.
Yeah.
So 7 out of 9 is a statistical spike.
Yeah. I didn't give you the 7 out of 9 though.
No, I know. John Brakey's the main one that gave us 7 out of 9. Okay, the guy you had arrested.
I didn't arrest him. The sheriff arrested him.
You. All right.
I don't have the power to arrest.
You ordered him arrested, but I will not. I'm not going to argue with you about that. My question is, how do you explain that apparent statistical spike? That 7 out of 9 of the party picked bags seems to have had a chain of custody issue.
I can't explain it. I can tell you that the audit showed that the ballots were absolutely right on the mark. Though, so
Yeah, that's which is exactly what you'd expect if somebody had his bags.
even if you have the signatures of the poll workers that worked on election night on the tape
In a
that
few
you're
cases-
auditing too,
In a few cases, well, the yellow sheet was missing.
the yellow sheet doesn't give you vote counts though.
Right, it does. It gives you total number of ballots processed, right? Okay.
So the votes are sound. The
Bev Harris
inventory
actually-
sheet may not be there, but the votes are sound.
In Volusia County, Florida, a couple of years back, Bev Harris actually watched Volusia County election officials running the old optical scan create new end-of-day tapes for some precincts. We have seen that category of fraud before, not in Pima. Look, my point here is that I can't prove nothing. Okay? Absolutely. I've got no proof of squat. I'm just investigating at this point. But my question is, this anomaly in terms of broken or wonky seals or chain of custody issues, you're saying you'd expect no more than 5%, and here we've got, what is that, 80%? Something like that.
Based on his observations, yeah.
Okay. Well, his observations are matching other people at individual tables. I mean, look, slowly I'm building the picture from sources separate from John Brakey, talking to the rest of who was there.
I think, again,
Brakey's information is coming up correct.
well, I would add this to the equation.
All right.
And that is that the seal numbers that are listed here,
Yeah.
that are signed for by political party members of opposing parties,
Right.
I think, with very few exceptions, and I'd have to go back and check my work again, match exactly the seal that was on at the receiving level.
Sure. Sure. But
So-
when you've got a seal on the outside of the bag, and we check that in, that's fine.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was one of the tables that would write a number like that in. However, when we open up the bag and we find another seal stuck to the bottom of one of the ballots, is what I found. Okay, it's another seal, and I look at the yellow sheet, and the one left over inside the bag matches the yellow sheet.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's not, a clean chain of custody as far as that matching that sheet. All right, look, I got to do some digging.
Okay.
That's obvious. All right. You'll say you have phone numbers
I'll get
possibly
some for you,
available?
yeah.
I was hired to be the elections director right after I had left 8 years in the Arizona State Legislature. Pima County had a disaster in the year 1980. We had 34 precincts that ran out of ballots on election day. A judge opened up the precincts the next day so that people could vote. That is unheard of. We were in Time magazine. We were the laughing stock of the nation. There was a legislative investigation from the Arizona legislature. I got the job to clean it up. I asked for two things. I asked the Board of Supervisors to give me free hand for 2 years and to give me the money that I needed to clean up that department. 9 months later, I ran my first election. I fired 300 board workers. This is the way you're going to do it. Oh, we've never done it that way before. What don't you understand about this is the way we're going to do it? Well, you can't tell me what to do. I've been doing it. There's the door. Bye. Give Jackie your name on the way out. The next day, I get a call from a board member on the Board of Supervisors. Larry, you can't fire that person. They're a good party worker. I said, wait a minute. Did you give me free hand? This person doesn't want to follow directions. Oh, I'm sorry, you're correct. Go about what you're doing. And we did. And we brought that division back into compliance with law, and we brought that division to where they had pride. And we ran great elections until 1992, when I was summarily dismissed by the coup d'etat that took place on the Board of Supervisors. What we have to remember is this is not a partisan position. Yes, I was a Democrat. Whenever I did something, the first people who got knowledge of it was the Republican Party. I'd go to the Republicans and say, here's what we're doing. Here it is right now. Just so you don't think I'm trying to pull something on you. Then I'd drive over to the Democratic Party. And then I'd give them the information. So that we're not playing favorites with this thing. whenever we did something, whenever we had a problem, the first people we called, county attorney and the two-party chairman. We've got a little problem here. Why don't you send somebody down here? We're going to take care of this thing right in front of your eyes. And if the press wants to sit there with us, they can sit there and watch us. We're not going behind closed doors and take care of this. It was in an open room whenever we discussed the problems that may have taken place. This idea that we can't get the ballots counted until 4 o'clock in the morning is nonsense. I used to bring 150,000 ballots in little metal boxes like that from 359 precincts in this county. We would get them into the building by midnight and have the count completed by 1 in the morning. And that means that we had to take the ballots out of there. We would fan the ballots. We would look for Hanging Chad. You remember him from Florida? We hung him here too a couple of times. We would clean the ballots. We would follow the proper procedure. We would run the duplicate ballots whenever necessary. We would then take the ballots up to the computer and run them through the computer and start turning out results. The first results came off at 8 o'clock because that was the earliest we could turn them out. And we would have nearly every ballot counted by midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. That's ballots. That's not bringing a small chip in or bringing a computer in with the chip in it. And you can take that computer and pull a chip out and put it in a computer and it's done. What's the problem? The problem is planning. Poor planning. Poor carryout. Poor ideas. Oh, we don't want to have anything to do with what Bay Hill used to do. So we're going to reinvent the wheel. Fine, as long as you've got a better wheel. But if your better wheel gives you results at 4:30 in the morning, maybe you better go back and look at the other wheel that gave you results at midnight or 1 o'clock. Training. Training of the board workers is atrocious. I will leave it at that.
My name is Benny White, 1715 East Kleindale Road. I'd like to have one more minute. I noticed most of the speakers ran over. I didn't. I'd like to respond to the allegations about the arrest of Mr. Brakey.
Go ahead, I'll give you that minute, sure.
I was the individual that brought it to the attention of my party chairman, Judy White, that Mr. Brakey was violating the separation between observing and giving instructions to the audit board members. And for that reason, I objected. He could have been telling those members to do certain things with Democratic ballots and certain things with Republican ballots. He's not permitted to give instructions to the audit board members. He was instructed to stop doing that and to bring his questions and concerns to the attention of the election officials. He refused to do that on multiple occasions. He was asked to leave the room. He refused to leave the room. He was asked to leave the building. He refused to leave the building. Eventually, he was arrested and removed from the facility because of the disruption of the election process. It was requiring all of Mr. Nelson's attention to deal with Mr. Brakey instead of conducting the hand audit, which is required by law. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. No. Excuse me. No, this is not a debate, Mr. Downing, I'm sorry. I gave him an extra minute because he asked for it politely. Just a second, let us have a go at it here. Thank you for your concern, and I understand that you want to respond to it, Ted. but I need you to just keep this in order, okay? All right. Name and address for the record, please, Mr. March.
Of course. My name is
Thank
Jim.
you for being here.
Appreciate it, sir. I'm sorry for being a few minutes late. My name is Jim March, 5947 South Placita Picacho El Diablo, Tucson, Arizona. When I heard of Brakey's arrest, I was actually there at the hand count, and I audited 2 ballot bags as part of one table. One of them, the seals were funky. They didn't match up the paperwork. I asked Brad Nelson some questions about it. He produced some fairly sketchy paperwork showing that indeed a seal had been swapped by a deputy, but didn't say the circumstances, didn't say anything documenting what had happened. I was puzzled by this, but I didn't realize that the problem was widespread. I also didn't hear of John Brakey's arrest or hear the arrest until later that day after I was out of there, I believe, for lunch. And I was near the door leading to the hallway where my understanding is he was arrested. So if he was being loud or disruptive or unruly of that sort, I'd have heard it. So when I heard about John Brakey's arrest, the first thing that went through my mind is, was it legitimate? Or did he have something real to complain about regarding those seals? And I started doing a public records search on Monday. I actually had a polite conversation with Brad Nelson, and I ended up going through this stack of records. Now, I could make you copies, but a better idea is I've summarized everything into one spreadsheet, and I'll be making CDs, blanks. I've got blank CDs with me, one for each of you plus one for the county attorney's office, containing my one-page summary of the results. And let me nutshell it for you. Out of 19 bags that were actually had the seals checked, because one bag wasn't counted because it didn't contain votes for the races selected, so it got sent back. Of those 19, John Brakey had noticed 7 messed up seals. Well, looking at the county's own records, I was able to confirm 6 of Brakey's reports, 6 out of the 7. And then I found another 2 with paperwork issues of one sort or another. So that's a total of 9. I then, 2 of them were pickups by deputies, and the serial numbers were different. So I actually called the deputies, and one of them, he says, yeah, legitimately, we swapped seals. Now, I've documented all that, but up until yesterday, I wasn't sure whether I was looking at fraud or simply bad procedures and sloppiness. And now, based on another document, which you're also going to get on the same CD, I'm now convinced it was sloppiness. I'll tell you why. Brad Nelson, that day at the hand count, did not document which seals were messed up and in what fashion. Were they missing? Were they wrong? Were they whatever? And they arrested the one guy who tried to gather that kind of information. But over at the receiving boards, I need about maybe 1.5 minutes,
Please
no
continue.
more. Thank you.
Finish up.
I appreciate it. Over at one of the receiving stations at 3500 River Road, there was a party observer there who noted what was going on election night as the paperwork came in. And that person produced a report, which I have in front of me, where precinct by precinct, there's a list. Blue bag not sealed. Blue bag not sealed. Canister seal in wrong place. Ziploc bag had broken election materials arrived in a cardboard box. Seal on blue bag removed so yellow document could be placed in bag. Seal on blue bag attached with the numbers on the inside and unreadable. Seal was removed and replaced. Blue bag not sealed. I'm reading for 1 page of a 5-page report. Now, what we're looking at is sloppiness on a scale I've never even heard of in election handling. And that same sloppiness evidenced itself at the hand count, and that's what John Brakey tried to note and document until Brad Nelson stopped him. We don't have proof of fraud with this stuff any more than a restaurant inspector going into an eatery finding pieces of dead cockroach and live rats and their droppings all over the place would not have proof that the customers are getting E. coli or salmonella. But you've got the circumstances for it. You've got the setting for a disaster, and that's what you're looking at here. Terrible procedures, terrible poll worker training, no checklists, bad procedures. You've had all kinds of grounds to fire Brad Nelson over and over and over again, for crying out loud, sleeping with the staff. As 2 eyewitnesses, that alone should have done it. This should be the nail in his career's coffin. You'll get the spreadsheets. I'll burn CDs while I'm sitting down.
Thank you, Mr.
That's about all I
March.
gotta say.
Appreciate your time. Let's hear from John Brakey. Mr. Brakey, please come forward and give us your name and address for the record.
Thank you, sir. My name is John Brakey. My address is 5947 South Placita, El Diablo, Tucson, Arizona, 85706. Once again, that's so long. Could you please start my time over again? I guess not. Anyway, I want to kind of follow on. I don't want to repeat anything anybody else said, but I want you to know that the first 9 bags, first off, I never got the chance to check the first 9 bags, because the time I got to the 7th bag, there were 7 problems. The first 3 were not open, were not sealed properly. The next 4, and I remember leaning over Brad on one of them, and I said, he was opening it, and I said, gee, Brad, could you show me the white yellow sheet in the bag, and let's see if the number verifies. So Brad stumbles through the bag, and then he picks up a white piece of paper, and there's 2 scribblings on it. I couldn't even read the names. And you know, Brad, you got about 3,000 poll workers, I imagine. And he turns around and he says to me, gee, John, look at this. And I recognize those 2 scribbles. Those are the poll workers. I never got a chance to go to bag 8 and bag 9 before I got arrested. I kept my civility. I was very watchful of the seals and the chain of custody because of what happened 2 years ago in another audit. And that man, Noel Day, testified yesterday that he walked into the warehouse and they had the bags open and that they looked like deers with headlights on them, and then looked at him and says, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. So I was very cautious. Now, let's talk about these bag seals having a problem. It's interesting that the first 9 bags had 7 failures. But the second batch that we drew that morning only had 2 failures. And you know, the possibility of those failures, you know, on the second batch are poll worker error. Because, and you know, and it bothers me when we always constantly blame the poll workers, you know, especially after the testimony by Larry Bayhill yesterday that we've recorded and him going through. You know, we had a press conference that turned into a really exciting sit down and understanding of what a good election department runs and how it's supposed to work. You know, I've been at this now for 4 years. And you know, Brad has a habit of not being able to, he makes things up as he goes, tries to bull people. And you know, I've chased him on these bulls, things he said, I don't want to use bad language. And I've gone down an alleyway and I found out that he just makes up things. There was nothing to it. And the man lacks character. He lacks capacity to tell the truth, which destroys his credibility. And I'm wondering, how can we have a person who fails these C's? His courage, I don't think is too good. Because, you know, a courageous man would admit a mistake. Okay? Does he love his country? I don't know, because a man who works and runs an election department has a responsibility to the people. And Brad, please resign for us. We don't need to have a person with your lack of C's in that office. And this, him being there, reflects upon all of you. Because what kind of characters have the capacity to have a man like that working here says a lot about your credibility, because this has been going on a long time. Getting to my arrest, I found things wrong. I did keep my character, my capacity, my credibility. I did show courage by saying, I'm sorry, Brad, I can't leave here until Mickey Donahoe shows up at 1 o'clock, and I'll be glad to leave then. No, you got to go now. I turned around to Deputy County Attorney Jerkowitz, and I said to him, sir, could you please tell me where I cannot talk to my auditors? He shrugged his shoulders and smiled. I've done 2 other audits before this, okay? And after talking to Larry Bayhill, and how a good elections director, when you have an observer who's responsible to make sure everything is transparent, that you would bend over backwards, but you don't hide things, because the more you hide, the more I want to follow along. Because, I do love my country. I do pride in my citizenship. I do take pride in my civility. I do take tremendous pride of being a character who has the capacity to stand up here for 4 years now, back and forth with you all, to be able to express that, Houston, we got a problem. And it's just not a Pima County problem here anymore. The whole country is watching this and watching you and the decision that you make today. I respectfully request that the canvass is postponed. We don't want lawyers involved. This is a very short window between this canvass, and we need to move fast. Now we require, per SB 1557, that we double up. We can go fast. I would ask you to postpone the canvass to no later than Wednesday, and that we go ahead Sunday, start, and go ahead and do this thing, and let's assure our citizens and voters in this town, Pima County, that it's accurate. And I too think that a lot of it is probably incompetency, okay? I'm not going to stand up here and say anything was fraudulent, but we have a responsibility to SB 1557 right that Ted Downing spent all that time doing. And I would ask this, please include any contested races of the Board of Supervisors to be part of it. Because there's no problem. It should be transparent. And then go ahead and say, on the next round, we will do the same thing, because that's fair. You guys are not just a Board of Supervisors, you're the Board of Elections. Nobody should have one responsibility. Just like the poll workers, think of it that way. You got Republicans and you got Democrats.
Okay?
I will. You don't assign your responsibility to one guy like Huckleberry, who's known about the back door of our voting system since 1996. I can go into the Arizona Daily Star and show you that when there was a problem in 96. We got testimony that Brian Crane was authorized to merge that data and learn about how Microsoft Access worked. I thank you. Please make a good decision on this. Because, like I said before in the back of this room, ladies and gentlemen, this is not about Pima County. It's about our country. Show that character. Show that capacity. Show that credibility. Have the courage to do the right thing. Take pride in your country, okay? And own our citizenship and take care of it. And I thank you very much. I'm sorry for the overtime.
Ted Downing will be our next speaker. Mr. Downing, please come forward, give us your name and address for the record. Thank you for spending your time here.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your service to the community. My name is Ted Downing, former state legislator. I live at 1402 East Kleindale, Tucson, and very pleased to be here. And as Mr. Brakey just said, I was instrumental with Karen Johnson in writing the hand count audit bill, which is we're discussing now. And I think the issue right now before the board is the canvassing. The way I see it, and reading 16642, you have anywhere up to 20 days to make that canvass. That means that a motion to adjourn right now, to postpone, would be effectively a motion to adjourn, to postpone. You could come back anytime within 20 days. This hearing has a statutory effect. And so I would suggest that there be a motion, hopefully a motion to just adjourn, come back after we do it. Now, what's the issue here? What's at issue here is what's always been, the hand count audit bill was put into place to increase public confidence, just like we have an audit for the county itself. There's been a problem with the audit, and you've heard that today. The problem is quite serious. In fact, let's put it in terms of probability, and you know I'm a research professor at the university, so I'll put on my other cap for a minute. The chances of what happened when those bags, those seals being compromised, and it's a very strange compromise, the chances are 1 chance in 1,000. That's pretty slim. And we've got the statistical analysis, which we'll be willing to hand the board, maybe somebody already has, to show that's true. Why? Because the bags are sealed, remember, with the little, they put the paper inside. Now the chances, now there was an option. The supervisors and the parties are responsible for observing an election, and the bureaucrats carry it out. You've heard me say before, there's 3 parties in this state: Republican, Democrat, and bureaucrat. And I think in this case we're seeing it. Anyway, what happened is, if I could just have a second more, okay? What happened is the observing the bags, something happened. The chances are 1 chance out. That's a reason right there to not trust the audit. The suggestion is you've got to go through, and according to the way I understand the statutes, you've got to go through and open some unopened bags. And the election director failed miserably when he saw those bags were compromised by not saying, we got 399 bags sitting back here. Let's pull one that hasn't had its seal broken. That's his job. And because of that, he's once more demonstrated, I think the issue here is he has cast a shadow over the election. I have talked to people that won and people that lost. Both of them asked me, did I really win? Now, we shouldn't have that happen in an election. You've all been elected. You know you wouldn't want that shadow hanging over your election. It's our responsibility, the parties and the supervisors, to make certain that there's no such shadow cast over. So it asks for postponement. I think finally I'd like to say that I'm very, very concerned. The November election's upon us. We've had a demonstration of incompetence. I've heard rumors that we shouldn't replace the election director. If he had any honor, he would tender his resignation at this point, but he doesn't tender it. So if he had any honor, he'd tender his resignation, or he'd be asked for it by the county administrator. But we're about ready to come up on a presidential election, knowing this is going on, and supervisors knowing it is going on, knowing this hearing took place today. Gentlemen, we changed generals in the middle of a war, and we're in a war. We should have the courage to get rid of an election director in the middle of a presidential election. Thank you.
Thank you. Have all the returns from our polling places been opened and received and included in the final statement of votes cast?
Mr. Chairman, yes, they have.
Okay, and does the final statement of votes cast include write-ins and accurately reflect the results of the 2008 primary election?
Yes, it does, and the entire canvas is available and has been produced on a compact disc, available to anyone who would ask it. Later today, we will be running the databases and providing that information to anyone who wishes to have it. All information has been completed, compiled, and the canvas is appropriate for approval and forwarding to the Secretary of State. And as required by law, this is a primary election, requires the canvas to be completed 10 days after the election. This is the 10th day.
Okay. ARS clearly states that in 1645B, this Board of Supervisors shall deliver the canvas to the Secretary of State within 10 days after the primary election. That's shall. It's not a question of if. If we do not do that, we are committing a Class 2 misdemeanor. We cannot do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that we approve the canvas of the September 2nd election, and I'm going to ask that we conduct an investigation regarding Mr. Brakey and his arrest and Mr. Nelson's performance that night. And I'd really rather have this investigation conducted by the Elections Integrity Committee that this board has put together, so that it's separate from the administration and so that there's some clarity there. And I'd also ask that we have, at the same time, investigate the fact of why those seals were not handled properly by our workers and what exactly happened there, so that we have some answers that define exactly what transpired, that were problems for that hand count that night. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second if you'll add something to it.
What's that?
I would also add, in addition to that, to have the same commission look at what mistakes were made during selection process by poll workers and come up with a set of recommendations on how to prevent them for the general election.
That's a good idea. I'll take that.
Second.
Okay. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Bronson, then we'll go to you, Supervisor Day.
the information or the questions that were raised, and I'm trying to remember who initially, Donahue maybe, who did this? Mickey, okay. If we could also have the county administrator or the appropriate department respond to those queries and make it a public record, please.
That's fine too. Okay, Supervisor Day.
I just want to ask, I didn't see any mention of the Election Integrity Commission in any of the reports that were issued this week. What's the status on the commission? Last I looked, there were 4 appointed. Is the committee in
I
effect?
appointed my person this past week on Tuesday.
Mr. Chairman, I think that we've got appointments by myself and 4 members of the board. Party chairs need to make their appointments. I think we're probably 1 short of a quorum at this point, and that's what's been holding up the election.
So we need
Integrity
to move
Commission.
forward on getting those appointments completed so we can get this done quickly. Okay? Because it needs to happen and needs to transpire very quickly for us, okay? So from the party perspective, please, let's get moving on that. And if there's any supervisors that have not made their choices yet, let's get going with it. Okay, any other discussion? You want to say something?
Mr. Chairman, no, I will provide the reports and the answers that to the issues that were raised by the public today in a format that's available to the board and the public. In addition, I referenced in my memorandum the additional work on the seals and the return of machines. All that information and recommendations will be completed, provided to both the board and to the Election Integrity Commission for their action and recommendations to you.
Mr. Chairman, one more item. There were some assertions, I understand, at the press conference yesterday that Pima County could have counted these ballots considerably faster than we did. Can we respond to those assertions, and can we also, whether it's administration or the Election Integrity Commission, have them review that particular item also?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly appropriate because, and I know that we're going to have a meeting with all the parties and people involved about those procedures that possibly could speed some things up. But I agree with Mr. Huckleberry's comment last week. Unless there's unanimous agreement of everybody, then we're going to stick with the procedure that we used on last Tuesday. What I would also say is that I think it's important that these reports from that election committee come forward to us prior to the general election so that we're able to implement any recommendations that they may make that this board agrees with. Roll call.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Supervisor Carroll.
Mr. Chairman, after the speakers and after comments from board members, I don't know if this would fly, but I don't know if we had an official, as far as approving this canvas today, I believe that by the 16th, that would be Tuesday, we could allow further review and further discussion with the county administration, the elections division, and members of this audience who have spoken besides our board members. I would like, if possible, to just adjourn this meeting as was recommended until September 16th for the reason that we do have an incredible, probably the most, the highest voter turnout ever in the nation will be on November 4th of this year, and I think we do have some problems we need to fix. I'd like to delay this action until the 16th, which is Tuesday. Keep it on the agenda, keep the meeting open, and also inquire to the Secretary of State, the Joe Canefield's office in Phoenix, the legislature, including Kirk Adams, the chair of a committee that could hold a public hearing, to get input before the end of this month to see if we can make sure that if there is legislation or if there is ideas that could help with integrity issues by 11/4/08, those would be investigated and implemented if possible. The 16th is not too far. I understand a Class 2 misdemeanor is a possible fate of that decision, but I think that the irregularities and the incident of the arrest of a poll worker and other things that have been identified today certainly do hurt the image of our free and open election process. I'd like to help restore the confidence of people in this room and myself and other members of the community who are not represented by a party at this time, to wait until the 16th to approve the canvass. And that's in the form of a motion.
Motion dies for lack of a second. I share Supervisor Carroll's concerns about election integrity and making sure that people know what's going on, and I have continued to show that consistently in my votes regarding election integrity. And you know what? We are at a stage right now where clearly the reading of ARS says that we need to finish this canvass today. That does not preclude other redress that folks might have for questioning the results of this election, but it's our duty to do that as it stands today. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Bronson?
Aye.
Supervisor Carroll?
No.
Supervisor Day? Aye. Supervisor Valadez?
Aye.
Chairman Elias?
Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
No.
4-1, excuse me. And this meeting stands adjourned.
We're ill served by your attorney who didn't read you the law. Okay? 16.622 allows you to vote.
Thank you, Pat.
He's not telling you. Why did you wait till the 10th day?
Sure, go ahead.
6642 allows you up to 20 days. You can take what you just witnessed is the Board of Supervisors, they had the power, statutory power, to postpone and investigate what's happened.
Sorry.
Okay? Okay, this is the okay? First, they based it on a lie. The statutes permit them to postpone, no matter what they said. It's right here, clear, black and white. What's going to happen is this is a precursor and a preview of the November election. When there's chaos, and if there is chaos in the November election, in this election department, the responsibility rests here with the Board of Supervisors. They made the decision not to investigate in detail right now and hold back the canvas what happened and why those bags were open. There's one chance in 1,000 of that many bags being opened that were randomly pulled out of all the bags in the county. And the election director could have done what any human being would have done, any reasonable person in Tucson. Say, go get a bag that's properly sealed to do the audit. Rather than that, he permitted the audit to go forward with compromised bags, possibly 9 bags out of 18 that had seals broken and were improper, something improper with them, and he permitted the audit of the election to go forward. If you had a CPA like that, you'd fire him. Either that or you'd go to jail with him.
So what do you think with the November elections?
November election is at risk.
and it's been put at risk by the Board of Supervisors' decision today because they've authorized an investigation of a committee that hasn't even been formed yet. And what are we? We're within weeks of the election. The other thing is they're afraid to get rid of this election director. You know what? We changed generals in the middle of a war. We just did. And when you know you're at risk, you should mitigate the risk and get rid of the person that's causing the risk. The election director should tender his resignation if he had any honor to protect the election and to protect our democracy. I don't know what's messing up down there, but we cannot put the November election, the votes of Pima County at risk, and they have been put at risk.
Okay, very good. Thank you.